Hi, everybody. I'm Ross the Boss. We have a very, very funny guy on the show today. He's one of my favorite comedians. He can see him on Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, HBO Max, you name it, he's on it. Sirius XM Radio. He does a UFC show, podcast. He's one of my favorite. Let's welcome Jim Norton. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ross. Thanks, man. It's nice to hear. I hate compliments. I'm not good at taking them, so thank you.
Well, again, we met many years ago, and really quick history. Dan, just bear with us. So when I got the job at the Tonight Show, I was in charge of booking the comics. And the second comic I booked was Jim Norton. And the first thing he said to me, "Are you sure you want to book me on your show?"
Did I really?
On your show? And then he actually became a regular on the Tonight Show with Jay. He would come on and do like comedy segments with Jay. Like they would do like stuff together, like a whole segment. So he'd fly in, do the show on a Friday, and spend the weekend in LA and go back to New York. And he was great. It was like the oddest combination of two comedians you can have is Leno, squeaky clean, doesn't do anything crazy, and you have Jim, who he's also a best-selling author too. If you read any of his books, you can see what he talks about. But it's two opposites, and it was really fun back then. I really missed those days, and thanks for coming on the show so many times.
I loved it, and this is what I remember about you. I met you at first, Last Comic Standing, and I wound up only going a certain distance in that. But you go, "Hey man, why don't you guys send a tape in? Maybe the Tonight Show. I think we would like to." So I sent the tape in, but only after you asked me a second time, because I'm like, "Yeah, they're just being polite." And then you said, "Hey man, will you send a tape in?" I'm like, "What am I, an idiot? The Tonight Show bookers asking me for tape," and I sent it in, and you put me on the show. Yeah, you guys were like the only network that gave me anything. So I love you guys. Tonight Show treated me great, and Jay treated me great.
So pandemic, I know you're in New York.
Yeah.
The clubs are closed. I talk to club owners all the time.
Yep.
How are you handling this whole thing? And maybe Dan can help you with the whole mindset.
I'm actually.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that soon, Jim. I mean, I don't want to rush things. As a therapist, I tend to sit back and wait. So you do your thing.
Oh, that's okay. I have a therapist who I talk to on Zoom every Tuesday. In my either in my house or my car, I'll sit outside and talk to him. And no, I've been doing okay with it. It's frustrating, like it is for everybody else. I quit like porn and all that stuff because that had spiked. It's just I wasn't seeing anybody, so it was like the porn stuff went through the roof, and then I just tapped out of all of it. So it's been a weird.
So you're done with the internet. You watched every video possible on the porn sites.
He finished the internet.
I literally came to the Z's, and I'm like, I'm done. I've seen it all. And it just got boring. I'm like, I reversed. I started to look for nice things. Like I didn't even want dirty stuff. It was almost like, hey, two people, look, they're holding hands. Like that's what I started to seek out. Because it flipped it on its head. I just couldn't even get into the hardcore stuff anymore. So yeah, I got bored.
So have you
done? Makes sense. Like hand holding became taboo for you, and so that's when it became exciting.
I just hadn't done it in so long, and it's the only thing that didn't feel desensitized. Like how it is. Everything gets desensitized it's like when you start doing drugs. No one is 15 years into drugs and still getting off on one joint. You know what I mean? You work your way up to heroin. That's how it is with anything else.
So do you do these Zoom or these drive-in shows or any of that stuff that comics are doing? I don't blame you. I don't think it's
no.
I just don't feel you need the energy of a room. You need to be in front of a crowd. You need to see the people's eyeballs when you're doing the stand-up. When you're doing stand-up, it's just not the same. And I don't blame you. It's
plus amazing. Nobody will book me. I keep sending out a tape. I'm trying to get a Zoom show. Nobody will put me in their Zoom show. I can't get booked.
So you've been doing your podcast. You do a new UFC podcast. Tell us about how that's going and what you're excited about. What big fights coming up?
Well, we do it every Monday and Wednesday. We actually tape today. It's the UFC Unfiltered. Myself and former welterweight champion Matt Serra, who's really a funny guy. But after getting into UFC and interviewing so many of those fighters, and they were all nice guys. All of them. And I interviewed Mayweather, and he sat there kind of with his shades on, not wanting to answer questions, and it's like the boxers I interviewed just weren't as cool as the UFC guys. They were more down to earth. So I just fell in love with the sport. And
Dan, you're a big UFC guy, right?
Actually, that's really funny. I assume you asked that facetiously. Ross, I think probably thinks of me as this very pacifistic kind of guy because I'm a therapist, but I listen, I like the idea of people being able to get out their aggression in a productive way. And what you're saying, Jim, I really like that idea of that they're nice. They're nice people. They open
Nice
up to
guys.
you. Like that's a totally different thing. I don't like the people who, they just think they're too much hot stuff to talk to you, but these guys sound like they're great.
Yeah, they're always humble with the fans. Like you watch them, and like anyone that will stop and talk to all the fans, they're nicer than any of the NBA guys I interviewed. They're nicer than any of the baseball players I interviewed. They're just, I guess, because they have nothing to prove. Like every one of them can strangle you. So there's no reason for them to be asses because they already know they're at the top of the physical pile. And all the fighters, even the ones who aren't as nice, are still nicer than most of the other athletes.
Yeah, I know. I know Joe
ahead,
Rogan. I know Joe Rogan gets in the ring all the time, and he actually told me if he doesn't punch somebody in the face every day, he goes crazy.
Yeah.
Are you one of these guys that do you ever train? Do you ever go in the ring? Would you ever do anything like that?
I would never do it. I have too much respect for what they do, and I've had these guys show me moves like to see how it feels. It's agonizing. Like the fact I've been put in a arm bars, heel hooks, chokes. And when you feel what it feels like to have another, like the only reason I'm not beaten up every day is because other men are choosing not to beat me. That's the only reason I walk around with my teeth is because other guys are choosing not to knock my teeth out. But no, I take a little bit of kickboxing. My sensei was a guy named Jimmy Rivera. But everything got closed down in the pandemic, but he's a great fighter. He's an active fighter. I think he's ranked number 8 right now. So as soon as this is done, I'm going to go back to training with him.
That's great.
Yeah.
So something you do, which I've been doing it for years, is when you see a celebrity, either at a TV show, in public, you get your camera, you know exactly how to set it, so you can take a picture with them. You do it all by yourself, and you've done this for how many? To tell us about it, and tell us your best story, and how you actually facilitated the shoot.
For many years, I don't do it as much. Like now I'll do it if I interview somebody, but I think my favorite photo is probably Susan Boyle is one of my favorite ones. Just because I did it because I don't really enjoy her. And I'm like, I have to annoy her. Madonna was awful. Like I asked her for a picture. I'm like, can we take a picture together? And she went, no, thank you. I'm like, well, I'm not offering you. I'm not trying to paint a picture for you, stupid. I guess, when they're not made up, Diana Ross blew me off. Mick Jagger blew me off. I've gotten better no's than I have yeses. But my favorite is probably my picture with Sabbath or my McCartney. McCartney was a tough one.
Tell us about it.
He was walking out of Stern Show. He did Stern Show and he was walking out with a bunch of security and I had a camera and nobody would approach him because they work there and they have dignity. I have none. So I just walk up to him and I'm like, can we take a picture? And I had the camera and he was such a lovely guy. He's like, hey, let my guy do it. So I hand it to his security guy who snaps a perfect picture of me and McCartney. He couldn't have been nicer. It's almost like the guy who should have been the toughest was probably the nicest out of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that about Paul McCartney all the time. I have actually said hi to Paul McCartney before, and he's like a man of the people. But I have the opposite problem to you, Jim. When I see a celebrity, generally, I'm worried that I'm gonna like have some kind of bad interaction with them that's gonna change the way that I would interact with them. So I usually don't like that.
Yeah, that could happen too. Where you could have a difficult interaction, but I mean, it's always willing because as a stand-up, I'm like, hey, if it sucks, I'll tell the story on stage, But usually they're okay. Madonna wasn't pleasant, and Mick Jagger wasn't, and a few of them. De Niro, the first time I met De Niro was 2003, and he blew me off for a picture. He was very nice about it though. He wasn't a dick. He was just like, if I take one, everybody's gonna ask. And I wasn't going to say, no, Bob, they've elected me, the one guy to ask. I knew he was right. So I just shut up and walked away and wept in the corner. But I did get it years later. I got my De Niro photo years later.
My favorite story, because I was with you, is when you asked Miley Cyrus for a picture and you were on the Tonight Show, you were backstage and you literally waited 2 hours because she was in her drink. Tell the story real quick.
I don't really remember it other than waiting for 2 hours and feeling like a creep. I'm like, was I 45 at the time? And I'm like waiting for a 19-year-old to take a photo. Like it was so humiliating. And sometimes in those moments, like, I went in one day when Magic was on the show, and I'm like, look, I'm in LA. Can I come in a day? Because I was doing the show the next time. I'm like, can I come in? Because I love Magic Johnson. And he was very gracious, and you guys were like, yeah, come in, meet him. But with Miley, I waited, and it was so
like a child molester. You waited.
Dude, I stood there like I was outside of a school with my van running out of gas, hoping to take the photo. It's one of my more embarrassing moments.
I loved it.
I'll only ask younger people if I happen to be in the vicinity now. Like, that was the last time I ever did that.
It was great.
This is one of the great things about your comedy, Jim, is that and I think this is true about a lot of comedians. They say the things that people wouldn't normally say. And you're so self-deprecating. Like, you're the king of self-deprecatory comedy, which I know you won't accept that compliment because you don't like that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
But how did that come to be? How did that come to be your shtick? I don't want to say shtick because
no. I know what you're saying. My thing. I would start it off doing jokes. You know how it is. Ross, you've seen enough guys. Like in your first few months, two guys walking to a bar. I was like happy-go-lucky, and I sucked. And then when I made fun of myself, or I told the truth about sexual issues or like weird, I noticed that the comedians laughed. And these guys who I loved in New Jersey, guys like Bobby Levy or Jim Florentine, they would respond to me making fun of myself. Like, that's really funny stuff. So the guys who I looked up to at the time responded and respected the fact that I was kind of making fun of myself and really blasting myself. And I became more and more honest as the years went on, and it just felt good. I mean, look, it's not all true. I've exaggerated a lot, but it doesn't matter. It feels good to vomit that stuff. I don't have to walk around it as a secret. It's not a secret. It's out there for people to see, and I put it out there.
No, it's like living free. You see this with, I think when people watch comedians, this is certainly true for me. I watch them and I think, man, it is great to just see somebody saying whatever. That's what happens when you watch Dave Chappelle. Like, half the time he's just saying things that are true.
Things he wants to say. And, it's like people get so angry at comics now, but it's like, hey, look, my job isn't to change anybody's feelings. My job, it's a therapy for me to go up on stage to, again, throw up all the stuff that I hate about myself, that I'm insecure about, the things I did as a kid that were naughty and dirty and other guys are embarrassed about. It's like, whew, that felt great.
Freeing. And
making people laugh. I mean, I want to make people laugh about it too, because it's the best when you can tell stories like that. I remember one time there was some story I was telling. It was a sexual story. It was not, a hetero story at all. It was just something I had done. And I remember I was in San Francisco, and it might have been, I honestly don't remember the story, but 7 Hell's Angels walked in the middle of the story. And I knew I had to finish the story. It was a huge distraction. Everybody at Cobb's looked, and these guys walked and sat in the middle of the room. And I know where this story is going, and I have to finish, and it ends up with me involved with penises. And these guys who you never would think would go, loved the bit. The guy was a fan. The people you never think will, I'm not going to say they're related to it, but they enjoyed hearing the material. So it's like all these ways that we think we should present ourselves. If you're just honest, people respond a lot of times. More times than not, people will respond.
No, your comedy is classic. There's nobody that does comedy like you. I mean, I can't compare you to anybody. There's no one does what you do. Somebody you interviewed in the past was Donald Trump.
Yes.
And you've talked about it. I'm sure you have a selfie with him. I love to see that.
I do.
But that being said, tell us about Donald Trump and give us some insight on him.
Well, honestly, Trump, I interviewed, I've met him. His son, Don Jr. is a friend of mine. He used to live above me. He lived in the floor above me when I lived in Trump Towers on the Upper West Side. So I got to know Don years before his father ran. And he was always very, very cool and down to earth. And I would bump into him in airports, and he was just a good guy. And I got to know him, and he was a very good dude. So I guess I went into this whole thing liking them because I knew him. When I interviewed Trump on the phone, this is, again, when Obama was still president, and I disagreed with him about Obama. I said Obama should get credit for bin Laden being killed because he made the call. The same way I think that Trump should get credit for al-Baghdadi being killed because he made the call. But he's like, no, any president would have done that. So I kind of disagreed with him. But I don't have any insight into him other than the fact that Don Jr. was really cool to me. He still is. So I mean, I don't hate Trump. There's policies he has that I didn't like, but I don't dislike Trump. And I'm also okay with Biden winning, and I know that sounds wishy-washy and middle of the road, but I don't care that much one way or the other.
I mean, it's kind of refreshing, I think, to have people who are just like, you know what, I can be okay either way. Can find something good in whatever's happening. Ross,
we have two choices. This one has certain things I like socially. This one has other things I like. Give me 3 and 4 choices, and I'll find one who I can check 20 boxes on. But right now, they each got 5, or each got 10. Maybe I should learn to do math. Mm-hmm. I say 20, and then I do 5 and 5. What an ass!
Jim, would you tell us the story of when you met Ozzy Osbourne? I saw a video of you talking about it, and it was hilarious. I just want to hear that.
Is this probably when he was doing an interview? Because I've idolized Ozzy, again, for many, many years. I used to call his record label in England and ask to talk to him. And I was crazy. Jet Records in England, like 1981. And this is 97 was the first time I met him. He was doing an interview at MTV. And I remember I went with Jim Florentine to meet him. And we just stood outside of his dressing room. And I looked in, and I've never been starstruck the way I was when I saw Ozzy. Like, I just stared into his dressing room, and he kept looking out at me. And then he finally walked over and closed the door. And I realized in that moment that I had made Ozzy uncomfortable. And I'm like, oh, like, what a ghoul to make Ozzy, who had urinated at the Alamo, bit the head off a bat, bit the head off a dove. And yet I made him creeped out enough. And I wound up following him to the bathroom. Jim and I went to the bathroom because we were like, the idea of seeing Ozzy's penis, again, just for reference, not for anything inappropriate, but just to see. I love this guy so much. I got to see. And I wound up not going through with it, and he wouldn't sign something because he was doing TV. But he was very lovely, and that was. He's my favorite. You
actually became friendly with Sharon. You became friendly with his wife, right?
Oh, and him, yeah. I text with him. I mean, he's it's so bizarre. Last time I was in
with you. I mean,
Ozzy does, yeah. I was in LA.
To see that, yeah. What's he say?
Well, last time I was out there was probably February, and I texted him and just said, "Hey, how are you?" And he goes, "When are you going to be in LA?" And I said, "I'm here." And he goes, "Why don't you come over?" He was doing a new record, and he had a bunch of tracks laid down. And so my manager and my ex-girlfriend I was going to lunch with, you've never seen anybody leave a restaurant faster. I left those two idiots just sitting there ready to eat, and I walked out and drove directly to Ozzy's house and listened to his new record. It was just me and him in a room listening to his new album. It was amazing. So yeah, he's great.
And were you dating that girl at the time, or was that your ex-girlfriend at the time?
She was my ex-girlfriend, but okay. It wouldn't have mattered.
No.
If we were dating, if we were getting back together, if she was pregnant and if her water broke, I still would have left her there and went to Ozzy's house and listened to the new record. Nothing would have stopped that.
So I was watching cable a few weeks ago. Spider-Man's on. Yes. And I see your face. Tell the audience the story how you got the job in the movie.
It's funny you say that too, because there's part 3 is coming out, and they're going to reuse Joey Diaz and a bunch of people in this train scene that they used. And so a bunch of people have been hitting me up going, are they going to put you back in? I had one line in Spider-Man. It was Man on the Street. And they said, you have to improv how you feel about Spider-Man. So everybody was saying what they were saying. And I wound up saying he stinks and I don't like him. And they kept that take. But I had done so many, like a lot of them were like dirty. I was doing like web masturbation jokes. And they're like, this is a kid's movie. You can't do anything about webbing flying off like a substance. So they finally settled on my one clean line. But I didn't get to meet Sam Raimi. It was a second unit shoot we did in Queens. But I probably made $6,000 from that in residuals. Like, God bless the union, because you get checks every time something happens. You get a $20 check, a $100 check, a $50 check, and that's 20 years from now. So I can't imagine what guys with a major part in a film get paid. I know I sound like my aunt, but I'm still getting checks for that.
I love it, Jim. Thank you for coming on. You're the man. We hope to have you on again.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
and Ross, thanks for everything, man.
And before anybody leaves, if you haven't subscribed to us, subscribe now. If you have some comments, give us some comments. Jim Norton loves it. I love it. Everybody loves it. Jim, we'll see you soon. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm Ross the Boss.